So Suzanne Smith, and I'm founder and managing director of Social Impact Architects, and I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of North Texas. And Social Impact Architects is in the business of social change. So I'm a social entrepreneur that is working directly with communities to try to achieve large-scale social change. So social entrepreneurship is a relatively new discipline. So first, social is the impact side. So social entrepreneurs are really focused on making sure they achieve impact, which essentially means that they're achieving measurable change in a community. The entrepreneurship is bringing that discipline, so the business discipline, to the social space. So in some ways, just like a normal entrepreneur, you are a social entrepreneur if you're doing both of those things. If you're looking at social issues in order to actually make big, large-scale change, but also doing it in a disciplined way. Starting from the very beginning, I got into it really from birth. Both of my parents were social activists, so they were teachers, counselors, and so they were very involved in their local community. So when they talk about entrepreneurs and it's nature versus nurture, definitely I kind of grew up this way. So much like Lady Gaga, I was born this way, but I also got through a series of all sorts of different great mentors and teachers, got exposed to lots of different concepts that got me engaged in the community. So from there, I actually started going to work for the nonprofit space, so the American Heart Association and Phoenix House, and recognized while I was there that things were changing, that the way in which we solved social issues was going to dramatically change. So in the 20th century, we could essentially sell programs, but in the 21st century, we were going to have to sell results. And so through that, actually worked with a mentor of mine, and he gave me a book by J. Gregory Dees called Enterprising Nonprofits. And I found my voice. It had been something I'd been talking about, but not really knowing what it was. And so that's when I first heard the word social entrepreneurship, got exposed to social entrepreneurs, and understood the discipline. And then actually, after the Heart Association, went to business school at Duke, and actually studied under J. Gregory Dees, and actually learned the specific principles behind social entrepreneurship. So for me, it was just one of those things that I don't know how to be anything else but being a social entrepreneur. At a very young age, I was a social activist and got involved in political campaigns, and then have just always been entrepreneurial. Everything from selling fruits and vegetables along by the roadside to now being an entrepreneur myself. It's just part of who I am. Social Impact Architects, part of our goal is to really achieve large-scale social change. And so we're constantly really looking at the communities we're working in and helping equip them with skill sets to help achieve that large-scale social change. So part of our goal is to really help enable that. So there are nonprofit organizations, foundations, socially responsible businesses already within the community that are actually doing the direct work, but we help amplify that. So we do that through our consulting work. So we consult and coach organizations. So people will come to us and say, we need a new strategic plan, or we need to measure our impact in a different way so that we can tell our story better. And so we can directly help them with that. We also have a DIY model as well. So you can come to our website, you can come to our training and learn a whole lot more about that particular topic and then do it yourself, because we think these concepts should be available to anybody, anytime. And we also have a blog called Social Trend Spotter, where we're trying to stay on top of trends. Just like in the technology and business space, the social sector is changing incredibly rapidly. And part of the way in which we accelerate social change is actually making sure that best practices in their hands of frontline people. So we try to highlight best practices. We also try to have some fun while we're doing it. So we try not to do the boring, like 20-page article that you barely can get through reading and just sits on your desk. It's just short and sweet and fun, and it's usually connected with a principle that is in the news right now. So we try to connect it with things that are going on in people's everyday lives and make it very practical. So it's very different because women dominate nonprofits, let's just be honest. I mean, part of the reason why we have the civil society that we do is because women went into that profession. And so they actually became the nurses, they became the teachers, but they also started the nonprofits. I don't think people realize that, but it was Clara Barton who started the American Red Cross. And I could go on with a laundry list of women who started nonprofits, and they've become household names today. So women really dominate in the nonprofit space as far as the number of employees. We unfortunately don't have an equally high percentage of CEOs. I think we're getting there. There's still a lot of men who are CEOs in nonprofits, so we still have some of the same gender barriers. But I think women in general, I think connect really closely to this culture of the nonprofit space. They're very consensus oriented. They're very natural leaders. They have a really amazing ability to be chameleons so that they can talk to a client in one breath, move directly to a staff meeting in another breath, and then the next breath they're talking to a donor. And it's the same woman, and she just situationally changes based on what's needed at the time. So I think women actually are incredibly well equipped to being nonprofit leaders. And then you're seeing that translate now into foundations and socially responsible businesses. So there are more women who are starting socially responsible businesses. In fact, Etsy just got sold, and it was a woman who started it, and she decided to be a benefit corporation. So I think you're going to see in social entrepreneurship women increasingly dominate, because it's just part of our DNA that if we're going to make money, we also want to do social good. So I think women have a real proclivity for social entrepreneurship. I'm inspired by a lot of people, and obviously the people who inspire me were the teachers and my parents early on, but now I'm inspired by my students. You know, there is nothing better than being in front of the 47 students that I have in my social entrepreneurship class, and you know, seeing those aha moments go off, seeing all the possibility that is in their eyes. And so to me, I'm really inspired by them. I do it on Monday nights on purpose because it's really the best way for me to start off my week. When I give advice to people about where to give their money, the first thing I say is, what issue area inspires you? What's something that motivates you? You know, what lights the fire within you? And so I say that same thing to my students, is to find that thing they're incredibly passionate about. And then next, I tell them to do the research. You know, so there's so many myths about education and healthcare and poverty that are out there. And so really to educate them on that issue so that they can actually be a good consumer of all the nonprofits that are out there. Because most are doing good, but not every nonprofit is having impact. And some of the smaller nonprofits have a harder time having impact because they can't get to scale. So there's a little bit also of a myth of, if I do a small startup, I'm going to have a greater impact, when in reality, you know, some of the larger ones that may actually have more overhead actually may be more impactful because they can actually achieve scale. And they've actually are following the research and the best practices. So my advice is typically do your research, be a good consumer just like you would with buying anything that you're buying, and then make sure you're doing something that you're really passionate about. And then that way you not only will give your treasure, so your money, but you also give your time. Because one of the things that nonprofits are most in need of is actually people who are incredibly skilled, to help them with their business plan, to help them with their entrepreneurial venture, to help them redesign their database, their website. And so sometimes your talent can be one of the best things that you can actually give. And for young people, it's a great way for them to get leadership experience. Millennials, I typically tell them that they need to be looking for 4 different things. And to me, interestingly enough, most people have not ever been told this before, and so it's probably one of the things that most resonates to them in my class. And one is that thing you're really passionate about. Again, the thing that turns on the light inside of you. The other is what you're best at. You know, what are you better at than anybody else? Because that's going to make you incredibly marketable. And the next thing is where the world needs assistance. You know, there's a lot of things that are interesting, but there are a ton of people already doing it. So where is there a void of some sort, or something where you could provide kind of a unique kind of perspective on it? And then, of course, where you're going to make the money. But I oftentimes say if you're passionate about something and you're really, really good at it and there's a void, you're going to make money. Money's just going to come. And no one's ever really told them that before, that that's really what they should be looking for. And so I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to what legal formation it is or what kind of venture it looks like. To me, I want them just to understand that everybody's a change maker. And whether you're going into a profession and you're doing it all the time, every day as a nonprofit executive, or you're going into a company and helping them lean out their value chain and source sustainably and from small businesses, or you decide to go make money and then you serve on a board and you give back your time. To me, that is being a change maker. So I also encourage them at the same time to be better consumers of the media and ask very detailed questions about what's going on in their community. So engage, so volunteer in some way, and then of course vote. That's one of the big things that I try to reinforce. So I would say the big theme that I see is that different than my generation that probably pre-recession was looking for money and was looking for status. I think that's changed obviously now, but they're looking for meaning. They want to do something that will put their stamp in the world. And so meaning is kind of the common denominator. And again, it's in all different forms. The thing that I have been really, I think I've learned over time is that I think we pushed as the ideal, particularly in my generation, that success was the thing that you should be looking for. So it was the cars, it was the house, it was the husband or wife or the children, and that was going to make you happy. And in truth, you can measure that. You know, you can say, I've been successful because I've done this. But I know a lot of people, an awful lot of people that I went to business school with that have achieved that and they're not very happy. You know, and so I think the thing that I really suggest to people is look less for success, although success is great and you have to achieve some success, but I look for significance. Like, how can you have a significant role in the world? And to me, success is a solitary activity. It's the thing you do on your own. You know, you're successful at a company, you're successful at a job, but significance is where you're pulling people behind you with you. You know, so you're doing it as a team, you're looking behind you and saying, who else can I help? How do I pay it forward? When you are successful, you look around and you try to figure out how can I give back to society. So to me, success is not the end state anymore. It's not the goal we should be searching for. It's really the significance. And I think about that every day, about what significance do I have, and making sure my ego doesn't get in the way. I think that's a really hard lesson that you have to learn is, particularly in the social space, it has to be about the people you're serving. It can't ever be about you. So I tell my clients to pay less attention to ego thinking and more attention to eco thinking. So what is in the best interest of the community? So I think everybody has failure, and you can judge a lot about a person by how they deal with failure. And so I would say probably the greatest failure that I had was going through my divorce. And it was one of those things where I think it was the first time I'd really had a personal setback and of that significance and that public. I think oftentimes you can shield your failure in some ways and not tell people. But for me, it was a great opportunity for me to really think about what my priorities were. And what I learned from it was really, how do you rebound? And for me, it was, you know, I had the divorce, I made a mistake, and I also figured out, how do I share space with myself for a while and let myself grieve and process and think about it and just be in that space for a while, and then rebound. And so one of the things that I tell everybody is it's fine to make a mistake, but it's only failure if you don't learn from it. And so I learned a lot about myself, the choices I was making, some of the gender stereotypes that I bought into that led to kind of some of the decisions I was making, not always being rational about how I was making decisions. And so certainly loved the person that I married, loved the situation we were in. We still were great people, but we were just not great together. And so for me, I think that's probably been one of the greatest lessons I learned is, one, how do you actually identify that something is a true mistake, and how do you not let it keep being a mistake? So actually making the decision to leave. But then two, how do you rebound? How do you process and then rebound so that you come out stronger on the other side? And so I actually really feel like that's probably, instead of it being a failure, it's probably been one of the most significant achievements I've made, is that rebound effect. The fact that I was able to rebound from that and came out stronger on the other side. So rebound is I think a formula that is different for every single person. One of the big beliefs I have about being a good entrepreneur, the ones who I think are really great, are the ones who've surrounded themselves with a good support system and a good tribe of people who can just be there for them. And so I've had girlfriends who have helped me through, you know, my breakups, my breakdowns, my breakthroughs. In that case, it was a breakup. And so I had these friends who were just with me, and they just shared space with me. They didn't try to solve the problem. They didn't try to make me feel better. You know, they just shared space with me. So one of the things I did is I had a return to singlehood party. And so I did that after I'd kind of gotten through and decided I was going to start dating again. So I invited my girlfriends and we went to a movie and we did a return to singlehood party. And so that was one kind of thing. The other thing I did is I did my first jumping out of an airplane. So I did skydiving. And so I had another friend of mine who had just gone through a divorce, and we decided that we were going to jump into our new lives. So it was a metaphorical change for me to kind of signal that my life was now going to be different. So those are some of the things I did that were more on the fun side. I think On a other side, I think one of the things I've developed since the divorce is more spirituality and kind of recognizing how, particularly as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of chaos that goes on, but how do I stay peaceful inside? And so I've learned to meditate, I've learned to appreciate the quiet, and to be honest, I think it's made me more productive as an entrepreneur in really pushing out the noise and really focusing on where my heart is and what when I'm most centered, and when I can actually listen to myself in a whole lot different of a way than I did before. So I've become a lot more internally focused and making sure that I am strong internally. I think before the divorce, in my 20s, I was much more external, like I was more outside. And now I focus more on what people have on the inside, which isn't their job, it isn't their career, it isn't the title that they have. It's who they are on the inside, how they treat people, how they manage their life. And that's more of what I'm interested in. I have a long list of things I want to do that I haven't done already. I think that's part of what makes you an entrepreneur, is that you are, generally speaking, once you've achieved something, you actually don't even celebrate that achievement. You move on to the next thing already, which I'm learning how to do that, be better about that. But I actually have a whole long list of stuff I want to do. I'd love to write a book and potentially working on a concept right now. I'd love to be able to go to all 50 states and all the continents, and so I'm doing pretty good on that list as well. I also want to see my nieces and nephews grow up and figure out what their purpose is and try to help them with that. So there's a whole bunch of things, kind of at a personal, professional, private side that are really important to me. So I think those are probably the things that probably stand out as things that I'm really looking forward to. I would say the main thing I'm passionate about is social change. I think one of the things that most people don't recognize, particularly in a lot of urban communities, is that there are people, who are doing really, really well, but there are people who are not. And really the big difference between the people who are doing well and the people who are not is merely zip code and the circumstances that you were born in. And so I'm a big believer that everybody needs equal opportunity. And I know that's hard to do because we all are born with a set of parents. We're all born in that zip code. But one of the things I am incredibly passionate about is giving people that equal opportunity. And it may mean that we have to go into schools and provide on-ramps into new ideas, new thinking. It may be mentorship. It may be quality early childhood experiences. It may be healthcare. It's all sorts of different things that I think we need to do in order to create an opportunity for people to be whoever they want to be.